We often imagine wedding nights as romantic, intimate moments, but in history, they were sometimes anything but. Across centuries and cultures, bizarre and even disturbing traditions shaped what happened once the vows were said. Tonight we're opening the door to 5 wedding night customs that will leave you speechless. 1. The royal spectator tradition. When privacy didn't exist. In medieval Europe, royal weddings were as much a political event as they were a personal union. The couple's marriage wasn't considered truly valid until it was consummated, and sometimes, the proof had to be witnessed. In France, England, and other royal courts, the new bride and groom could find themselves being escorted to their marital bed by nobles, courtiers, and even family members. Curtains would be drawn back so observers could confirm they were in bed together. In some cases, high-ranking officials stayed in the room until the act was underway, an official seal on the political alliance. One of the most infamous examples was the wedding of Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette. Their marriage was so important to Franco-Austrian relations that their wedding night and its success was a matter of state concern. Unfortunately, it didn't go smoothly. It took 7 years before the union was finally consummated, much to the frustration of the French court. This tradition wasn't about romance, it was about power, legitimacy, and the cold eyes of politics invading the most intimate part of a marriage. 2. The bloody sheet proof, a public test of virginity in parts of Eastern Europe and the Middle East. The wedding night was seen as a public test of the bride's virtue. After consummation, the couple's bedsheet was inspected for blood evidence that the bride had been a virgin. In some regions, the sheet was displayed proudly to guests, a visible badge of family honor. If no blood was found, the consequences could be devastating for the bride. She could be publicly shamed, divorced, or worse, regardless of the fact that many women don't bleed during first intercourse. This wasn't just a custom, it was a form of control, deeply tied to patriarchal ideas of purity and family honor. In some areas, this practice continued into the 20th century, with mothers-in-law or female relatives waiting outside the bridal chamber for the sheet. While it may sound shocking to modern ears, for centuries this ritual carried enormous weight. One stained sheet could mean the difference between respect and disgrace. 3. Bedding ceremonies. The whole village helps you to bed in some rural European traditions. The wedding night was anything but private. The moment the festivities ended, the bride and groom were put to bed by their guests. Literally, in places like Wales, Scotland, and parts of Germany, villagers would escort the couple to their chamber, singing bawdy songs, making lewd jokes, and sometimes even physically undressing the bride and groom before tucking them in. In the Scottish Highlands, this could turn into a raucous event where guests piled into the room, continuing to drink and laugh until the couple pretended to be asleep or until the last guest stumbled out. It was less about intimacy and more about community, in a very intrusive way. To the people of the time, this wasn't seen as rude. It was part of ensuring the couple was properly set on their new path together, with the entire community as witnesses to their union. 4. Trial by combat. If you didn't approve, challenge the groom. In certain warrior cultures, a bride's family or even the bride herself could demand that the groom prove his worth on the wedding night. This could take the form of challenges, duels, or tests of strength. Among some Viking communities, stories tell of brides testing their grooms with wrestling matches or even mock sword fights before they were allowed to share the bed. In some Slavic tales, a groom had to break into the bridal chamber, defended by the bride's relatives, to win the right to his wife. While some of these accounts drift into legend, they reflect a culture where marriage wasn't just an emotional bond, it was a demonstration of a man's strength, skill, and ability to protect. For the bride, it was a final chance to see if her husband truly measured up. 5. The morning after inspection. Proof for the family. In some societies, the scrutiny didn't end on the wedding night, it continued into the morning. In Renaissance Italy, for example, noble families sometimes gathered the morning after to hear a report from servants or attendants about whether the marriage had been consummated. This was especially common when large dowries were at stake. If the marriage was not completed, the agreement could be renegotiated or dissolved entirely. In some cases, annulments were granted on the basis of non-consummation, leading to political scandals. One famous case involved Catherine of Aragon and her first husband, Prince Arthur of England. When Arthur died young, questions about whether their marriage had been consummated followed Catherine for years, influencing her later union with King Henry VIII and sparking one of the most famous marital disputes in history. From public inspections to physical challenges, these wedding night traditions remind us that love and intimacy haven't always been private matters. In many cultures, the first night of marriage was about politics, power, and public proof, not romance. So, the next time you hear the phrase happily ever after, remember history had other plans.